Welcome, everybody. You are joining me here with Ian Lehn, the founder of BOOSTane. You may also know him as the SEMA Person of the Year 2023. And yeah, we sat down to talk here on Creators and Coffee is the name we just secured. So that's exciting. But yeah, exactly. To talk a little bit in this deep dive with Ian about who is Ian Lehn, if you don't know him, right? How did you get to where you are? I mean, to look at him on camera, he's a young guy and seems to, from the outside, has achieved so much success. And I think a lot of people look up to you, want to know how did he do what he has done? So would love to hear a bit more, kind of you taking us through, Ian, how you got here, a little bit of your background.
Yeah, no. I guess it really depends on how far we want to go back. But I mean,
like birth.
Yeah. I can say, no, I think I have that a lot in common with a lot of people in the industry. Like, just like there's that innate passion for racing and automotive, power sports, anything, somewhat. I've always had a competitive nature, sports and things like that, playing rugby growing up, played a little bit of football in college, did all of that. But there was always the through line of motorsports. I raced motorcycles when I was younger, then got into karting, and then did some road racing in college. But, I would say in every stage of my life, whether it was growing up in my small hometown in Ohio, or moving to Atlanta to get my engineering degree, or moving to Florida to start my business, and then moving around the country with my business, there's always been like the common denominator, which motorsports has always been kind of the rock that I could always fall back on. And it was always something that I realized is a place that I could go and decompress a little bit, turning a wrench and making stuff work or go faster has always been something that I've had a passion in. So when I went to school, I went to Georgia Tech to get my engineering degree. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do with that engineering degree. I just knew that was what I loved doing. And it kind of fit everything that I had done up to that point. So I wanted to get better at whatever I was going to be building. And then I was entering my final year at Georgia Tech in getting that degree, and I needed to have a senior exit thesis. And at the time, my old man was racing some offshore power boats. I was doing some autocrossing. And both of us kind of complained at the dinner table, like, man, race fuel is just a pain in the ass. Like, whether it's getting a hold of it, what the cost was. He was having a whole another set of issues just because he couldn't get race fuel down to the dock to fill the boats up. And we had tried other fuel additives, and they all had different problems that they ran into. And I was just like, hey, I have a really cool internal combustion engines professor. I need a senior exit thesis. This could be my capstone. And I proposed it. My internal combustion engines professor was also my Formula SAE alumnus advisor. So it just kind of worked out. I was like, I can make my own fuel. And essentially that's what we did is we didn't reinvent the wheel. We made the spokes better, essentially. And we developed some proprietary carrier to keep things, all attached nicely. And essentially I graduated. I think I got like a B+ on that project.
Seems weird. No.
Yeah. Looking back at it, and I stay in touch with that professor. I always give him a little bit of hell about it. And BOOSTane.
You give him swag and say, ooh.
Yeah. I was like, Dr. C, like, you could have. It wasn't that bad, right? I wasn't that bad at presenting. I never really liked talking in front of crowds. Now I feel like I do it all the time. But no, it was a cool experience. And to be completely honest, what a lot of people don't really know is that when I graduated, I didn't even, BOOSTane wasn't originally what I started doing. It was what a lot of people don't realize. I graduated in 2010. I didn't start BOOSTane until 2014. There was 4 years there where I worked on a different project, where essentially it led me to Panama, and I was growing watermelon and riding a horse to work every day.
As it happens.
completely random. You know, a lot of people think I did other stuff down there. No, it was very exciting. I did not need to do anything crazy. I grew watermelon and sold them to Amsterdam, of all places, Amsterdam and
Hmm.
Poland. We developed some other technology that we were testing down there, and I thought the best way that I could prove it was buy a farm and do all that. So my joke I always tell everybody is, even though I wasn't doing BOOSTane full time, horsepower was always a part of my life, because I did own one horse for that entire time, because I couldn't afford a truck at the time.
Oh my
So
God.
there was that aspect. But
Real quick, in that period, you were actually working though for a company or for that project.
no, so we got brought in as consultants on a
Okay.
post-harvest technology, and essentially we proved it wrong. Uh,
Right.
and the government of Panama stepped forward and asked us if we could develop it. So I started another business called IntelliAzul. So I started a completely separate business, and we were manufacturing other stuff entirely for fruits and vegetables. What I found out is I'm a very good engineer. I'm not a really good farmer. So all
Good
of
to
our
know.
stuff worked. I was just not very good at farming, and I'm too pale to be out in the sun for that long. I was getting like burned all the time. They didn't. I had to like bring in my own sunscreen. Like, they didn't sell
Yeah.
SPF 75. No, it was a really cool experience. But essentially, what ended up happening is I was finding myself coming back to the States, and I was making the fuel for people that had gotten used to using it more than I was spending time in Panama. And then actually, the same professor, Dr. C, said, you should check out this show called SEMA. And I was like, really? That's pretty neat. And I looked it up and realized it wasn't just a show, it was an association. I
Right.
joined FLN. Back then it was YEN, the Young Executives Network. I just joined the network, found out about something called the YEN Power Tour, which was, they sent 10 young people on the Power Tour, and I got to meet people like Kirsten Stone, Johnny Mill, Jared Suki, all these people that are now very involved in the industry. And that was it for me. I was like, holy cow, there's
Right.
actually a career that could be in this world. It's not just buying cars from the dealerships, and if you're not Edelbrock, or if you're not one of these Hollies, like, you're not going to make it. There's tons of these small businesses everywhere. So it was actually Johnny Mill that had just won Launchpad, said you should really try out for this Launchpad competition. Ended up winning, and then that was, the rest is history. I met people like Doug Evans and Ron Coleman and Marla Moore that basically became my mentors, that
Yeah.
I still bother. I feel like I bother them all the time with questions.
What year was that for Launchpad? Was that 2014 that
14, yeah. So
yeah, you did Launchpad and you won that, correct?
I did. So I incorporated, I think, officially like end of 2013. Went
Hmm.
on the Power Tour and
Right.
tried out for Launchpad like right after that. So, I mean, the Power Tour happens in the spring, found out about it. So I was in the industry for less than a year and did
Right.
Launchpad and went to the SEMA show. And like, as somebody who'd never done anything like that, to see Launchpad and then see the SEMA show, I was like, holy, I had never been to Vegas before. I was like,
Oh
oh,
wow. You were
so
in it. You
yeah,
just
it
dove
was
head first right in.
baptism by fire. And and then meeting all those guys, and like Doug and Marla, like, that helped. But no, it was good. It was good people. I already had a good network through Yin. I felt supported, so
Right.
I felt confident that wherever I was going to go, I felt like I had people around me that were gonna, that I could lean on. And that's why I'm sitting here today, is because of all those people that I've leaned on over, man, the past like 10 years, I
Well,
guess.
yeah. So I was just gonna say, so Launchpad, no pun intended, but intended, launches out BOOSTane, right? So
Yeah.
now all of a sudden what had been a bit of a side hustle becomes you are now in it full time.
Yeah.
What has that been like, right? Of these last 9 years of growing a business, like what have been some of the biggest highs, and what have been some of the things you've learned that,
Um,
so you do it different, but
Yeah.
You give advice to someone else to maybe do it different.
I got some really sage advice from a guy named Chris Johnson who started Super Chips. And he said that you're going to have this out of the gate rush and people are going to be excited and then it's going to die. Like, and you're going to hit like this dead space and it's going to be really scary and you just got to prepare for it. And if you can weather through that, you typically come out the other end pretty strong as a company. So, I mean, he nailed it perfectly. We finished Launchpad. You know, people were really excited to meet us, find out about the technology. A lot of people were starting to use the product, and then that initial buzz, which was what I figured out was less about the product. It was more about all the marketing that we got from Launchpad. So it was all marketing. It kind of died off. And I thought people were just going to keep lining up for my stuff. I was like, this is easy. But Chris nailed it. I hit this like year and a half lull where I struggled really hard. And what it forced me to do is I think really look into kind of the business side of BOOSTane, not just designing and engineering products, because I found that to come fairly easy is developing new products. It was trying to find efficiencies in shipping, doing little small things here where you can keep your margins, and then really understanding the industry, because I think that was another learning curve for me as somebody who wasn't in the industry. I was just an enthusiast. I really didn't understand what it took, the small idiosyncrasies within the industry, as you know, how to do business with jobbers and WDs, and our industry is very skeptical. You know, I feel like snake oil is a term that holds very true in our industry. To come out with a product like mine, where there have been a lot of snake oils before it, I had to do a lot to learn how to market and tell my story. And I think that's the biggest thing. One of the biggest recommendations I would give to people is, if you're passionate about what you've come up with, learn how to tell the story of what your product's doing. Help people understand how it pertains to what their passion is, because that's ultimately, if you can tell that story, and draw that correlation for people, it takes care of a lot of stuff.
Well, and how did you learn to do that? I think that's something that a lot of business owners, they hear this advice and then they go, okay, well, if I don't got to tell my story, how do I learn? What would be your advice there?
Well, what's funny, I mean, you and I talking, obviously there are people that are very good at telling stories. There's a lot of influencers out there that do a great job, probably a better job of telling the BOOSTane story than even I do. But I would say, even before you reach out to them, you do need to understand what your own story is. I mean, and I think it's really just getting out there and doing it and experiencing it. I learned a whole lot going and doing shows and just putting myself in uncomfortable situations and talking to people, because what I learned early on is, outside of my very narrow understanding of racing, I knew racing as it pertained to me, but what I realized is that it only represented 2% or 1% of everything that's out there. And I had to learn about, drag racing and drifting and off-roading, Baja versus UTV, then you have just, not street racing, but street vehicles. You have Texas 2Ks. You have all of these different little things. And I think you just really start to understand where the similarities are, and where the differences are. And I think if you're genuine about it, I still go to events all the time and somebody will say something and I'll be like, I have no clue what you're talking about. Like, explain it to me. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Sounds a whole lot like these guys over here. They just call it something different. But if you're genuine about it and you say, I made this product because I wanted it and I liked it. people will usually tell you how it applies to what they're trying to do. But, don't ever try to act like you know more than somebody, because usually you
Right.
don't.
Yeah.
And just be genuine about it. And usually people are pretty receptive about that. And I get that all the time. People still are way smarter than I am, even on my product. And I'm willing to like learn something new all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. What is the future? What's next for BOOSTane? What's next? Kind of, do you have these next big goals, right? Like this is a big thing to
Yeah.
do. Launch this brand. Have been at it for next year will be 10 years, right? So officially incorporated this year, 10 years, and next year will be really kind of the business out there. So what is next?
Did you just make me realize that I'm coming up on a 10-year anniversary and I
You
should
totally
probably
are. So if you haven't planned that party, you probably need to get on it.
see this? I'm telling you, I'm still not a good marketer by any means. 2024, I'm anticipating being our biggest year. There's a lot of stuff happening in the industry right now. I'm taking, and this is from the hill to, to everywhere in between. I think that there's an evolution happening, and there's a lot of narratives out there, negative and positive, that are being misconstrued or misinterpreted. And I think that there's an opportunity for BOOSTane to step up and help tell the story of our industry a little bit from the position of a small business, and a small business that has made their entire, career out of petroleum distillate. So we're going to be releasing some new technology that will be at the future tech area at the SEMA show. And we're partnering with some very cool people to be able to pull that off. And what we're really hoping to do is use that as a platform to be able to tell the people, on Capitol Hill, that our industry is here to solve problems. We're not here to try to get around rules. And if you work with us, we can come up with sustainable solutions. So I've used that to kind of steer a little bit of our business. So we've got some new fuels that are coming out that I think that are going to be very cutting edge, and they're going to be for the consumer. We've seen some fuels come out that are for IndyCar and IMSA, and but we need stuff for us. I have
which is
I have
much
an old
larger.
I have an old
When you
car.
think of
Are you telling
racing,
me?
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, the layperson will think of those, kind of flagship series, and that's maybe all they know. But as you said, as you get more into the industry, the racing in and of itself that's even been a lesson for me and for the team at Autofluencer as we look to develop technology for that side. I mean, it's massive, and it's the actual amount of people involved in that industry is huge versus these few, like the ones people could rattle off.
The volume is held well below that. The volume of racing that takes place is held by the guy who's in his garage like this, tinkering on his car, and it's snowing outside. I have a heater on, and I'm trying to get something running for when it thaws out. That's a majority of the racers. And we have old cars that we're working on that we want to be able to provide a fuel for those older vehicles, and them have an impact on lowering our overall carbon footprint. And it's taking a lot of time and a lot of investment from a small company that doesn't have maybe an unlimited budget for engineering. But I think it's imperative that people understand that our industry is made up of small businesses like BOOSTane. And even though we're small, that doesn't mean that we're not trying to come up with the next big thing. So we just need a little room to be able to do that type of stuff. And racing affords us the capability to have that room. So 2024 is going to be big. We're going to be at the SEMA show. We're going to be at PRI. We're going to have some bigger booths that I'm already getting yelled at by the accountant. But I want to do it. So, and now it's the 10-year anniversary. So there's another argument.
Even more reason. You're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll have a really cool car out there to do that. And then actually we're working on with some other friends doing I called out my dad at Thanksgiving. We were arguing about like Ford versus Ferrari. We just watched that movie, and he's got like an old Ferrari he got running, and I have an old '69 Mustang. So we just called each other out, and we're going to be racing in the Big Bend Open Road Race, which is a big race. And I think Ford Muscle and Power Auto Media guys are all going to be following along with us. But I realized that getting a car running for the Hot Rod Power Tour is very different than doing a 200-mile across the desert open road race. So that is what I'm working on, literally on the other side of that wall.
So that'll be like, the personal side, because that was going to be the next question too, right? So running this business, it's obviously, as you said, it was started as a passion project, started as you trying to solve a problem, for yourself, for your father, and then racing. It has now become this business. And it intertwines and intermingles so much with your passions and your hobbies. How do you find that balance for you as Ian to have a life outside of this business, or do you have a life outside of this right now?
I guess it depends on when you ask me that question. Right now it seems like I don't, because end of the year stuff. But ultimately, you gotta have. I think if you don't. There's been those times where I've buckled in for a few months and haven't done anything or lifted my head. And at the end of it, I'm way worse for wear. And mental health is a thing. I didn't, and, I've had some breakdowns, but, I think when I find myself making the conscious decision to do some fun stuff, now I justify a lot of the fun stuff because my business also just happens to align with stuff that I love to do. So, I can justify going out and doing a big race for a week, and paying for some marketing because it's, it's more of a story to be told with BOOSTane. But, I still play rugby, and that has nothing to do with racing, just a little bit of a competitive thing to run around. And, I think it's definitely imperative that if you got to find those things that don't have any attachment to what you do for work. And that's what rugby is for me, and hiking and things like that. Because as much as I love tinkering, it is still kind of has a little bit of work to it. So I'm not always, I don't turn all the way off, but I find places.
That's great. Now, last thing, is there anything I haven't asked you that you want people to know about either BOOSTane or your journey or, Ian Lehn, that when they think of you, they go,
oh, man. No, I don't know. It's, I mean, I feel like we covered a lot of bases. We even covered watermelon. I don't usually get to cover a whole lot.
That will not happen probably ever again.
If I'm the first person of the year that was once a watermelon farmer, then they can never take that away from me. If I was the first one to ever do that. No, I think we covered everything. The biggest thing, I don't know what I'm supposed to do as person of the year. I'm beyond humbled that I've been recognized for that. I feel like as soon as kind of the butterflies all wore off and I got off stage, I felt like this overwhelming sense of responsibility now that someone from a small business and had been given such a huge honor, and I've been trying to figure out what I should do with that. And honestly, like, if it's just me telling my story, that really I didn't come from a huge private equity or did any of this. Like, if anything, I'm just as much like everybody else in the industry as the folks that came before me. Because I think a lot of people, there is a misconception that they look at the SEMA show and they see how big it is and these huge stages and these big personalities. And you almost, and I had the same feeling. I felt like I didn't know how to relate to that. But all of those big personalities and big names that you see are, and not saying that I'm one of them, but like all of those people are, they all have like the same story that I just told, like of where they kind of came from and how they got into it. Like it's funny. I've been fortunate to call, friends, people like Jesse Combs and Jared Deonda and these guys that are on TV and just bigger in life in a lot of ways. But then you sit around with them and you're like, oh God,
Right.
you just happen to be really good at talking, but you're just super cool and
Right.
just like the rest of us. And I don't know, it's reassuring for me that I'm in an industry that has that kind of community around it and that network, because I feel comfortable to reach out to people and ask for help. And that's one thing that I always would say is like, don't hesitate to ask people for, questions or guidance or something like that.
Yeah.
There's tons of people out there that are willing to do it because everybody wants to see this industry do well. And we're in a really weird place where we all need to kind of come together and,
Yeah.
And fight maybe is the wrong word, but just, come together and educate and tell people what's going on.
I was going to say, educate, be heard, right? And find that story that resonates to amplify the voices of the industry that this is, when you look at it, this is the largest enthusiast economy that, just looking at the United States, but even potentially globally, very aligned into the performance aftermarket, and where you find a fervor and a passion and a love for what people are doing that is hard to find anywhere else, right? Like, you think about even with professional sports, people that are obsessed with, let's say, a football, but you can't go out and just play football, right? Whereas like if someone who's obsessed with racing or they're obsessed with cars, you can go out and work on that car. You can go out and race. You can go out and do those things and make it a huge part of your life. And I think that education around the power of that, even when you're talking about mental health, that just for people's mental health, to have this outlet, have this side, I think it's great what you're doing and all the others that are working on that education and getting that story out.
I thought that was such a cool story through COVID. Everybody was all locked up in their house and people started doing cruises because everybody would stay in their car, but they still felt like they were getting out and hanging out with their friends. I was like, oh my God, that's genius. And it came from a bunch of, race car people. No, it's an incredible community. I think that there's tons of room for more innovation to happen. So, if you're a new company or you're coming out with something, there's plenty of places for it. There's so much room to grow. And I think if our industry is going to stay relevant, we need that next generation to kind of, pick up the torch and keep running with it. That's why I still do a lot of stuff with youth engagement. But, BOOSTane is not going anywhere. We've got some cool stuff that we're going to be doing. I like hanging out with everybody. I still don't know what I'm supposed to do as Person of the Year, but
I think you can wear a sash and like a crown and
Let's just start referring to myself in third person. Just be real pretentious. Yeah.
There you go. Solved.
No, I think I can do that. I think it's super cool. And honestly, the whole influencer community, I mean, there's a huge, and I think that's something that Autofluencer is, you guys are solving or working to solve, kind of bridging that gap, because the influencer community within the automotive aftermarket is booming and bustling, but there's still a little bit of a disconnect between manufacturers and influencers. And we found great people to work with, like Solomon at Ford Era. You find those diamonds in the rough that do great, but you end up like having to go through 50 that just kind of like take some parts from you and you don't get anything out of it. Right. And you almost have to, it ends up being a vicious cycle where you have to justify the lowest number of product that you can give and not care if you get nothing back. But that ends up almost being worthless to somebody who would do a really good job for your product or your company. So
fuel can be a tough one, right? Because it's not something that's
not real sexy.
Kind of the vehicle that you can see, or it's not obvious, or it's hard to do like an install, or like it's a bit more of that you need that content creator to do put a bit more effort and thought, so it doesn't also come across as inauthentic.
Yeah, exactly. And there's the authenticity and being able to be a good storyteller and
Yeah.
tell people of why, a product like ours is going to be a solution for them. That's why we're very particular about who we work with and who we sponsor as drivers. So no, and I'm excited. I'm excited that Autofluencer is going to help, bridge that gap. The big thing for us is just being able to manage, set expectations and goals and things like that. That's where we usually find success. But ultimately, I'm just excited you guys are going to be there's there's something going to be made for us. It's not
Right.
taking something that's worked for
And trying to
gamers
it.
or a makeup, and
Yeah.
us trying to work it into what we do. It's like we're too unique of a community to take something off the shelf and make it work. So we need something customized.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, Ian, thank you so much for sharing and deep diving with our audience. We really appreciate that and everything. We're all excited for 2024 and for BOOSTane and your big 10-year anniversary. We'll look for the invite to the party with Snoop Dogg. So totally just
No
kidding.
no pressure. No pressure now. Yeah, great. Now it's a 10-year anniversary.
All right. Thank you.